So let's go into it. Okay. So for paper one review, for the general criterions, remember that for criterion A, you need to know. Criterion A is basically understanding. This is going to be how much knowledge you show. I don't really think I need to explain criterion A too much, other than the fact that you can't make basic interpretations with criterion A, otherwise you're not going to score very highly. You need to be convincing. You need to make a decent interpretations. A lot of people fall into the trap of where they just describe what the text is talking about, but they don't actually do anything with it. You need to elaborate on it. Yes, unseen drama, people are not really prepared for unseen drama, and it depends on the type of unseen drama that appears. If you get a really bland one, I don't think students are going to do well, because they need to read into the subtext of the dialogue, and you're just not ready for that. Criterion B is analysis and evaluation. A lot of the things I've said for Criterion A also apply here. People tend to lose points just because they describe and they don't really do much beyond description. Follow whatever structure your teacher taught you, whatever structure you learn, like peel or whatever, or petal. Like I've read so many essays where people, like, their elaboration is just like petal, where the elaboration is just like, this is bad, or this is an effect on society. You can't say that and expect to get good analysis. Oh, is that Miss Norbury? Hello, Miss N. Thank you for coming to this session. Criterion C is also one that is a nightmare for me when I'm reading paper ones, because I can clearly tell when someone did not plan for Criterion C. Criterion C is, please, for the love of God, plan because your Criterion C is 25% of your grade. Also, there is an important part with the guiding question. A lot of people fall into the trap of they don't know what to put for the guiding question, and so they kind of ignore it. Please don't ignore the guiding question. I'm begging you to not ignore this guiding questions. Like the subject report for the subject reports have like repeatedly said people that ignore the guiding questions tend to do worse than people who have taken the guiding question into account. It's basically IB telling you what they want to see. Please use it. Like, people argue with me about this all the time, but I know their teachers tell them that you are recommended to use it. Use the freaking question. Use the question. I mean, it's recommended that you drink water. Use the question. Criterion D also, one of the common pitfalls I see people doing is when you get into an exam mode, you just kind of start using the same words over and over again. It's where people like lose the opportunity to gain points. If you're using the same words for the same adjectives or the same literary devices over and over again, you're not gonna be able to gain as many points because you're being repetitive. And not even just beyond the like flat use of vocabulary. If you repeat things, also gonna lose. Also not gonna be able to gain as many points for Criterion D, because you won't be clear and accurate. You'll be losing, and also C also, where you're kind of like not organized or coherent. So you'll get 5 minutes of reading time. In that 5 minutes, what you should do is read and digest. Think about what concepts in your brain. Like think about okay, characterization. Think about themes, like basic literary devices, basic conventions, basic themes, ideas. Like first try to understand what the text is saying, and then kind of build up from there. Generally, it helps me to be able to identify a genre if it is a prose. Just because if you identify genre, it's just much easier to form a thesis sentence from there. You don't have to follow this exact format, but I like using this format where the author's work and then the name of the work shows whatever thing through the literary device is D, and then the significance is E. Always include significance in your thesis statement. Yeah. I think people are really bad at remembering the title. You need to add a title at the top. Do not forget to add a title at the top. My advice is to leave a little bit of space. Yes. I'll be everything's gonna be posted. Everything's recorded. Yes, you have to add a title for your paper one. It's just like a simple title, like I don't know. Yeah, it's just a simple title. I was always advised to use just a simple title at the top. I don't know, like trying to think of one on the spot, like the importance of blah blah blah. Blah. I don't know, like creative title name. Um, yeah. Uh, also watch your time. The title isn't required. However, make sure you label which prompt you're using in the box. Ooh, ooh, oh yeah, yeah. Don't make the mistake of not labeling which prompts. Um, I think general structure should be very easy. Um, body paragraphs are gonna be from the main points in the thesis. I advise you have at least 3 body paragraphs. Two body paragraphs make pretty long chunks that, in my opinion, are just kind of an eyesore to read because it's just a glob of text. Um, three is usually enough. You don't. I've seen people do 4, but you don't have to do 4. 3 is usually the sweet spot. Um, each body paragraph should have its own little topic sentence. I've noticed people are really bad with transitionings. Um, you should be using internal transitions instead of like saying sequential transitions. That is where you might not be gaining as many points for what is it? Criterion C. You want to have clear focus and good flow. So yeah, internal transitions. Don't transition with like first, second, or last. That doesn't. It's not a very good way to move between ideas. It kind of makes these like it kind of separates the text instead of your writing flowing nicely. So for HL, you guys are going to be having 2 essays. SL only gets 1, but you have the same amount of time to write like per 1 essay basically. I would always keep a track of time because time can really escape you in these exams when it's high pressure and like there's a lot of adrenaline going on and you get really focused. Um, make sure like you have at least 5 minutes at the end so where you can read and revise, like maybe cross out some stuff that was wrong, fix a little bit of your grammar. Um, so with planning is recommended. It's highly recommended. Not everyone plans the same though. Um, for me, what works for me when planning is I'll plan my thesis statement, and then based on my thesis statement, I will kind of make little. I'll make my 3 topic sentences, and I'll like circle which parts of the text I'm going to use as evidence. So my outlines are very bare bones, but they get the job done. And then kind of what I might want to use for the conclusion later. Your conclusion doesn't need to be crazy in depth. You just need to have a conclusion, otherwise you're not gaining as many points for structure. Don't lose track of time because you need your conclusion for the structure. No. When you encourage thesis statement, points, evidence, line number only, outline. That is a good outline structure. That's a really good one. The next one is how you're going to be dealing with the text. I usually do it thematically. I wouldn't recommend line by line unless you have a poem, honestly. Even then, I prefer doing thematic over line by line for poems. Line by line is, I feel like you waste a lot of time doing line by line. You don't need to follow this acronym, but I've used this during the exam and it's helped me kind of organize the basic bare bones of whatever I want to analyze. Yeah, line by line becomes very descriptive, which is why you end up wasting time, even for poems. For 2, having a line of argument is very important. What I do notice with students that tend to do poorly for Criterion C, I believe, which is which is the criterion that's based on being sharp, clear, and concise. What I do notice for that is people tend to kind of write and then they forget about their initial line of argument and they kind of veer off. Make sure as you're writing, you always loop back to the thesis statement. Ask yourself, is this supporting what I'm writing? Am I supporting it, or am I going a little too off track? Always reference back to what you start with. Use language you understand. Okay, if you don't know what something means, don't use it. If you're trying to find the literary term for whatever device, like maybe you forgot what I don't know, a hostess was or Zugmo was. Don't freaking use it if you don't remember the name. If you don't remember the name, just describe it. It works just as well. Because if you can describe it, you can analyze it. If you don't remember conventions all that well, you're not going to be screwed over. You don't have to grind remembering conventions. If you know the basic ones and you can analyze them, you're fine. Descriptions are fine. A lot of people use pedal. My teacher made us use P. This is just a brief example. But yeah. Manage time wisely. I've mentioned this before, but I will mention it again. Time really flies by during these exams. Maybe you've noticed it during mocks, but always check the time. Make sure you're on pace. Maybe you're writing too slow. Maybe you're writing too fast. Usually I keep track with page count. For most people's handwriting, usually one essay is about 3 to 4 pages. Depending on how small or tiny your handwriting is, it might vary, but 3 to 4 is usually around where most people fall. So that's how I keep track of time. That's mainly it for general paper 1 tips. We can go over revising the genres. So drama, I don't think we've had unseen drama yet. I know for my exam session, we did not have unseen drama. Miss N, did we ever have unseen drama for N21? No? Okay. You don't know what it entails. Drama is arguably the most unique out of all of them, in my opinion. So drama, you're gonna, since this is like a more physical setting, you're gonna have things like the stage direction. You have to consider the scenery. You have to consider the lighting. You have to consider the three unities. A lot of plays, if you notice, have like a single action, single place within a single day. I think Oedipus Rex, and Antigone were both three unities. A lot of plays are also three unities. You'll notice it with a lot of Greek plays, but I doubt you're going to be getting Greek plays for the exams. What I've noticed with unseen texts is that they tend to be more modern, in my opinion. No, I meant like, I'm like, I'm really, yeah, no plays in translation. I can't think of an English play that has three unities. I'm trying to think. You won't be getting Brechtian plays because Brecht is not English. But it's important to know maybe defamiliarization effect, which can happen just because you're in this dramatic setting where you sort of separate the audience from whatever's going on in the physical like scene of the play, just to get them to be analytical about everything that's happened. Yes, you can still use ideas gleaned from playwrights. Um, the first thing, what I would focus on is dialogue. This is going to be more dialogue heavy in terms of plays. It's going to be very different in a lot of I'm trying to think. So you have to talk about the tone of the extract. So how is the dialogue going to establish the tone? What is the context? What's going on? Where is this set in place? In time? Is there a power dynamic? Body language is important. A lot of plays will have characters doing certain things, and it will say out in the stage directions. So you have to think, well, the stage directions are a new convention. How do they affect the play? Maybe they don't give a ton of description, or maybe the descriptions are very significant to what the play is saying. Maybe nonverbal communication is important, or maybe they're just simple and rigid and they're not meant to be interpreted in certain ways. It's just how the play is going to unfold. Now for the characters, you have to think about who is present and how they're going to interact with one another. Since this is going to be a different narration style from regular prose, you have to sort of focus a little differently on how the characters are being described, what diction is being used. Characters are going to be much more important in drama because there's less description in prose, and plays can be more dialogue heavy, especially the plays that are more bland. They don't have as many fancy conventions for you to analyze. So since dialogue is a little more important, you have to consider, is this formal, informal? Why might it be informal or formal? Is this going to reflect culture or any different creed? How can this be relevant? Maybe they're speaking informal because they're in the countryside and they're poor farmers, and maybe this could be a play about this could be a play with class commentary. Especially so when you have those sort of bland plays that are very minimalistic, you have to look into the subtext of the relationships between the characters. So you're going to be looking at the power dynamics. This is not something you'll like think of right off the top of the bat, but certain nuances in how people interact are going to be dictated by different creeds, like race, religion, sex, blah blah blah. You can't look at it at the surface. You have to think a little differently about how each character's emotions are at play here. This is especially true for the naturalistic ones because they are the bland plays that I hate analyzing. But if you get a play that's a little more dramatic, they have soliloquies, they have monologues like Hamlet, you'll have a lot of fun. There's more analysis to be done. So another unique feature of drama is no author from the material will be on an exam. Oh yeah, I'm just giving examples. The exam unseen texts are pretty out there in terms of they're pretty obscure for sure. um the prescribed authors list. Um so plays will also have a unique convention in the narration style. There might be a designated narrator, there might be a chorus. If you've read uh, the Greek tragedy and plays, those had choruses. Um, and so you have to think, well, if you have specific narration going on, and that's expanded, maybe there's a need beyond just having basic stage directions or even detailed stage directions. What might be the impact on how the message is being conveyed? So yeah, these are a list of conventions I would kind of review. These are pretty basic. You don't have to go too much into it. Definitely remember mise en scene. That has to do with like lighting and scenery. Um, split focus is important. Costumes, you won't really have to worry too much unless they give you a physical description of the costume, or like you can glean it from the description of the character. So prose. So I really did not like the nonfiction prose they gave us for my exam session. I'm hoping you guys will get fiction prose, honestly. Um, so prose, you have to think it's just like the other prose. That's the S. Um, for prose, it's gonna be just like the other basic genres. You have to first start at what is the general vibes you're getting, what is the basic plot, what's going on, and then what immediate themes and ideas come to your mind as you're digesting this. Drama extract wasn't M21 before. We did not have drama for M21. I don't think for time zone 2. I was time zone 1, so I'm not sure. Hmm. If there was drama unseen, then yeah, it makes it even more important that you review drama. So for prose, you have to sort of look for conventions of different genres. Like what is the form of the work? Is it a Bildungsroman, which is a coming of age story? Is it modernist, like The Great Gatsby? Is it satirical? Is it tragedy? Is it dystopian, like 1984? Basic plot and basic descriptions will be able to tell you what type of text this is, even if you have a small extract. For example, dystopian, you might get an extract that talks about how something is in disrepair or there's a state of constant surveillance. That would be dystopian. Review the basic genres and categories of literature, just so you can have an idea of what might be on the exam. And in my opinion, it's much easier to generate themes and analyze when you know what the category of literature is, just because you know the standard conventions for that type of category. Modernist, yes, modernist. It's been a while since I've read modernist literature. Goodness. So it kind of emerged in the late 20th century, actually early 20th century, because as a result of like industrial life. I don't know too much about it other than yeah, Great Gatsby and George O'Keeffe. Yeah. Okay. Structure is going to be important. Students tend to neglect the structure a lot. You need to address the structure at least in some way, or at least think about the structure. You might not write about it, but think about the structure. What is the syntax like? Is the sentence structure varied? Is it in paragraphs? How is the tone and language conveyed? I'm trying to think of a very unique example of prose with different syntax. There was one book I read where all of the sentences were in lowercase and there was no commas. So that really was an interesting way of expressing the syntax. Because when you have I'm trying to think. Yeah, different commas. No, it wasn't the bluest eye. It was, gosh, who was it? It was Cormac McCarthy. Cormac McCarthy. Trying to think. Cormac McCarthy, and it was a cowboy book. It was, I think, part of the Border trilogy. All the Pretty Horses. Yes, I was kidding. Sorry, got off track. So what type of sentences did it have? I'll show you. Let me find a screenshot of all the Pretty Horses. The copy I read was definitely it had minimal grammar. Some of it was lowercase, I think, in some places, but yeah, minimal grammar. Yes, different sentence lengths will put emphasis on something. If you're spending more time talking about something, that might indicate something. If the pace is getting quicker, maybe you're trying to convey a urgent tone. Narration is going to be very different from narration in drama. So you're going to be considering mainly pretty much first or third person narration. So first person is always going to be limited. So think about first person. First person, what that limit of information might do, because you're limited to only one person's perspective at a time, or different types of third person. You have third person limited and third person omniscient. The access to information is the key difference for these types of narrations. It's going to affect how characters are described. It's going to affect how they're characterized. It's going to affect basically what you know. Okay. Thank you for correcting me. It's not really a narrator. A poem has a lyrical speaker. Yes. For prose, remember to evaluate your work. Like I said before, people tend to describe it and then describe the effect, but then you need to evaluate it. How does this affect the overall message? How effective is the work at conveying this? This is going to be, the evaluative statements are going to be what gets you good marks for the analysis criterion. You just can't simply discuss the effects or like a convention of the text. Okay, poetry is arguably my favorite one. So once again, as you're reading, like all of the other texts, what immediate ideas can you gather about the work? What is the poet or the lyrical speaker discussing? So the form and the scheme are going to be very unique for poetry, but from what I've noticed, they tend to give you more informal poetry. So it's not going to be something that has like a rigid structure, like terza rima. It might have meter. I'm not. I don't think it will have iambic pentameter. They like to use more modern and more free verse poetry. The poem for TZ1, May 2021, was Easter Monday. In Memoriam ET, which is pretty. Let me pull it up. I'm gonna send it in the chat. Okay. You don't have to discuss meter if like you don't know how to discuss the meter. It's fine. So that's the poem from TZ1, May 2021, that was used on the exams. So if you don't have a formal or rigid rhyme scheme, rhythm, structure of any sort with like certain lines, there's going to be less to comment on terms of that for the rhyme scheme, the musicality, and the form. You're going to focus more on the language and the diction over like broad ideas and maybe like the internal rhyme scheme. A lot of works that probably don't have an external rhyme may still have a good repetitive internal rhyme. And then symbolism, you have to think a little more abstractly. So what I always do before I even read the poem, I just like count down I write down, I make a mental note of how many stanzas and lines there are. Sometimes the numbers of lines and stanzas relate to like another concept in the text. Like if you have 13 lines in a poem about bad luck and depression, maybe the 13 is relevant there. I'm also trying to think of different numbers that 4 is usually seen as a very unlucky number in Asian countries because it can relate to death. 7 is also seen as a lucky number. There's not really other numbers I can think of. Yes. Yes. Always look at the last words to see if there's a external rhyme scheme. And you can sort of see if it's like interlocking or what type of rhyme scheme. Is it AABB or like ABCD kind of rhyme scheme? Line length is also going to be important because then you're changing the pace. Changing the pace will change how you read it. If it's very slow, you might have a more relaxed tone or more contemplative. If there's a lot of breaks, like it's very short, there's a lot of end stops, choppier sentences, there might be a sense of urgency or something else about the poem that relates to those like abrupt end stops. So with narration, the lyrical speaker is going to be very different from the other types of narration. Well, it's not exactly narration, but it's who is speaking. No, you can, a lot of times it's mainly the persona from what I've seen. For the poem I sent of the past exam, I do believe it was not a persona of the poet. I think it was just straight up the poet. But knowing who is speaking dramatically changes the context of the work. It might mean that they might be talking about a certain type of people. They're portraying something, or it might be very personal. A lot of poems are very personal. People write about their personal experiences. People write about the struggles they've experienced in life, losing a father, losing a loved one. Like a generalized, like maybe the lyrical speaker represents people who have been heartbroken before, or people who have lost their homes. I'm trying to think. Structure is also going to be very critical for poems. Are there caesurs? Are there enjambments? If there is any punctuation, how does that affect it, and what types of punctuations? Are you going to have em dashes? Are you going to have colons? Are you going to have semicolons? How is this going to work? And what are they being used for? This will dramatically impact the pacing of the message if you have a ton of punctuation. So end stops are going to provide conclusion and finality, while the em dashes and the commas will provide longer pauses that will slow the pace of the work. You're taking a lot of breaths in between. So how can slowing and pacing down the reading affect the message? Why would the poet intentionally make this design choice? Maybe they're trying to be frantic. Maybe they're trying to be more placid. Maybe it's more clinical. Just try to think about how it might affect the message. Maybe it also affects the musicality if you have a rhyme scheme at all. When I do annotations, I try to group words into like specific types of diction. Like maybe I've noticed a lot of words relating to time, so I'll circle the ones relating to time. It makes it easier for me to make thesis statements or find evidence, group evidence into bodies for my thesis statements or topic sentences. A very common grouping is like usually words of negation where they have don't, never, no, not, or diction of nature. A lot of poems are talk about the moon, talk about the water, talk about the sun. You might have more earthy poems too. I've seen a past exam that did talk about nature and the animals on the planet. Okay, so the last one is going to be rhetoric. Rhetoric is a very unique one. So, pathetic fallacy? What is the pathetic fallacy? Um, I don't know what that means in this context. So for rhetoric, first you have to establish the rhetorical situation. Because rhetoric is based on giving a speech to someone, the fact that there's an audience there and usually the person giving the speech has a goal in mind, an agenda, this is going to change the situation. I know what a pathetic fallacy is, I just don't know what you meant in this context. So who is the audience? Why is the speaker addressing this group of people? Is it invoked? Are they imagined or are they real? Invoked means that it's explicitly addressing them, but they're not actually there. And imagine is hypothetically a hypothetical audience. What might be the goal of the speaker? Maybe the speaker is a pastor trying to give a speech. I've read the transcripts of Martin Luther King's sermons. Maybe he's trying to give a sermon. And maybe who's the speaker and how does this affect their motivations? If you know he's a pastor, you know what he's trying to accomplish basically as he's teaching you and giving you these messages. The context is going to be very important for analyzing the subtext of the speech, because the context is going to drastically influence what the speaker is saying, what their motivations are. So the time, place, the culture, the society, it's all going to affect the text in its original delivery in the time period. Will affect why it's being written and why it's being conveyed. So what role does the context have in influencing the creation of the work and the delivery of the work? And does the work effectively respond to the problems presented in this time period? So for example, Martin Luther King gave a speech on the Vietnam War. He was one of the first Vietnam War protesters before it got popular, so he got a lot of criticism for it. During the speech, he says this might not be popular, so like in the context, you can see maybe this is early Vietnam War when sentiment was good. Kind of like read into the historical context of this. People tend to struggle with having background knowledge. There's not really much you can do to fix that other than read a lot. Supporting evidence. So supporting evidence is mainly going to be in the form of the rhetorical triangle. So what is the speaker going to be using to back up their claim? There might also be intertextuality where they reference other works, and also allusions where they reference historical figures or historical events. So for ethos, do they have experience or credibility in the subject they're discussing? Are they relevant? Are they relevant personal, professional, academic experience? Are they a doctor? Sojourner Truth Sojourner Truth was a really great example of someone who had a ton of credibility. She gave a speech called Ain't I a Woman? And she talks about all of her struggles as like a enslaved woman, and like her struggles of being a mother. In that instance, her credibility in talking about the situation is that she's had relevant experience as someone who's like struggled and like lived with the reality of being enslaved and like being a mother that has had her children ripped away. So remember that ethos does not always have to be someone who is like a doctor, someone who's like a scientist, someone who is a part of academia. It could be just someone who has a lot of experience personally with some type of event in their life. Are they trying to convey certain emotions in the audience? So, for what reason? So, think about the context of this speech. So maybe they're trying to evoke a certain emotion in the speaker for them to rouse the speaker to get them to do something, or provide or invoke empathy for a certain cause. Okay. And then the last one is going to be logic. Does the logic convince the audience of their message? So this is going to be when you're citing facts, statistics, historical events, research, studies. How does their logic hold up? You don't have to really know logical fallacies for this one, but yeah. And then last part of this is the warrant. So the warrant is very important. I feel like just keep the warrant in the back of your head. So these are the beliefs and the values that the speaker shares with the audience. If they don't share a warrant at all and there's no common ground, the speaker might not be effective in conveying the message. So if a speech is good, there's going to be relevant common ground. There's going to be relevant warrant. How and why. Okay, so yeah, that's basically the conventions. The genres. Do you guys have any other questions? Well, the warrant is here. I defined it. The warrant is the belief and values that the speaker shares with the audience. It's just the common ground based on the context. If you don't share a common ground, the speech is not going to fly well. There's going to be no connection. Yeah, it's not super common. I don't know a lot of people that are able to do it. I've seen people that are able to do it just because they got lucky and they knew about the event in question. But yeah, use your intuition based on like all of the reading you've done in the past. You're not gonna know like specifically what happened here, but based on all of the experience and the practice you've done, try to read the situation, try to read the characters, look at the subtext, analyze.